This is Alec.
And this is Jack.
Welcome to another episode of Smith and Scholar. Smith and Scholar is a multimedia project dedicated to promoting and encouraging young men to pursue and live the good life. And we're back.
Indeed we are.
So we've been working pretty busily in the meantime because, that's what we talked about last time.
We have been busy.
And we've been studying because we're still in school. So
True.
yeah, it's a little bit of both. And wait, why did I mention studying?
Because it's connected to work.
And it's because we're talking about today.
That's right.
So what is study? It's learning. It's digging deeper into different topics. Most people, almost everybody, has definitely engaged in the practice of learning at some point in their life. If you're listening to this, because for the most part, most people go to school, even if that just means K through 12. I think you kind of have to go to school in most countries. So
for the most part, I think
yeah.
so. It's compulsory.
Yeah. So anyways, you should have a pretty good idea of what study is in terms of school, but we're not quite talking about school study. We're talking about something outside of school study.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, like Alex said, what is studying? It's learning. But what we're really talking about is studying as devoting time and attention to acquiring knowledge, apart from what, like Alex said, from your coursework. We talked about that last time. We really consider that to be work. And that might be a little confusing, trying to delineate between what we consider work and what we consider study. But we hope as this episode goes on and we explain things a little bit further, it'll become clear that as clear as we can make it, that study is separate from work and more in the vein of leisure, which we'll be talking about next week.
Yeah, so we just introduced another topic after saying this is not quite work, even though we did incorporate study into work. So bear with us as we go through this because, I guess we should start off, make it clear. Study can be work. Study is work in most cases. Mm-hmm. In this instance, we're talking about study outside of coursework, which, again, what we consider work, and more in the vein of leisure, which is restful activity, which we will cover next time. So, okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And I mean, what we're really talking about is we're saying that we think studying is good for its own sake, that the acquirement of knowledge is a good in its own right.
Yeah, and that's pretty similar to what we were saying about work last time too, in that work is good and it's good of its own accord. And I mean, we had a few stipulations about what is good work.
Right.
It's something that is honorable, just, and whatnot. I think the same can be said for studying.
Certainly.
And I guess things have changed, but I was going to say most topics of study are pretty honorable. If you think about mathematics, literature, stuff like that. Yeah, that's I guess good studying. And there are new topics nowadays that maybe aren't as good as they are in the past. But we'll get to that a little bit later. Let's talk about the different ways we can study or learn.
Yeah, so like we were talking about last week with work, there are different types of work. There are certainly different types of studying, right? What we're all used to being, for those of us who have been in school or still in school, we're used to reading books, right? This is, think about your good old textbook, I mean, obviously that's like work studying, but still you can study by reading books. The new found thing, like the modern thing, as we're demonstrating here, is listening to a podcast or even watching a podcast, because people watch podcasts these days. And there's other things too, like, apprenticeship. This is kind of an older thing, right? The idea of an apprenticeship. And, this is something, in the area of the world in which I am in, which is the legal world. It used to be more of a thing this is something that you see probably more often in like, areas of work that are more like skilled with your hands. But in the law, this used to be a thing, and, apprenticeship, watching and learning. I mean, it doesn't have to be a formal apprenticeship. Like there are informal apprenticeships. And then, there's also all sorts of additional classes out there these days with things like YouTube. And then, there are free resources out there. I mean, you can log on to, congress.gov and read every bill, law, that's, been in existence. They have it all digitized. Their professors put their lecture notes out there. And we could talk more about all these later, but this just gives you a kind of an idea of the wide breadth that there is when it comes to studying.
Yeah, definitely. With the advent of the internet and people putting their class resources online, you can basically learn anything anywhere. You just have to Google it. Wikipedia, maybe not the most reliable source, but still, they have, the information is there. It just takes some will, determination, and whatnot to go learn it, again, on your own free time, sometimes using those resources for class, like tree octopuses.
Tree octopuses?
Yeah, it's a bad source. So, as we talked about, learning is good for its own sake. Knowledge is good for its own sake. And we're not going to totally go down the rabbit hole of, let's say, like Gnosticism and the attainment of knowledge and sort of the worship of knowledge, because that's not necessarily good, because you're placing, one good higher than others. And we haven't really gotten into the ordering of goods necessarily. We talked a little bit about the ordering of passion and will, but there are externalities in this world that we can also place. Anyways, the point is, knowledge is good, education is good, but it's not necessarily the greatest good. So if we want to put learning or studying succinctly, we can say it's a process by which one studies and acquires knowledge, and making you a better person along the way. And so why do we use this? Why do we say this? And why do we study? And I think one thing is that studying helps us learn and recognize what is good and true. So it's a means to an end, it is an end as well. But again, maybe wouldn't say it's the ultimate end. And so I'm about to pass it off to Jack, but if you don't already know where we're going to say learning, studying is about the attainment of virtue and living the good life. So and that's, what we're talking about here.
Right. Yeah. Alec just summed it up. Absolutely. The reason that we find studying to be important is because it's a way of helping us recognize things that are good and true and leading the good life. And it can help us develop virtue. I mean, we've brought up lots of examples throughout previous episodes we've done, pointing to things, where we've read or watched or listened or learned and have brought those examples into our lives as things to emulate. And so overall, study can help us learn quite a bit about all of the virtues, because for one, the actual material might be on the virtues. You could potentially, if you wanted to, pick up Joseph Pieper's The Four Cardinal Virtues and read it. And, you might be doing this completely aside from, I had to read it in part of it in school because, that's what we were studying, but you could pick it up and read it and learn from it. There are other things out there covering the virtues. You could read Nicomachean Ethics, which is, all about virtue ethics, and, that's sort of, again, where we get the idea of the mean between two extremes being a virtue, and trying to think about that and actualize it. At the same time, though, the study itself can provide, can be the actualization of the habitualization of virtue, we should say. So, for instance, sometimes study, even though it's a good in itself and is kind of in between work and leisure, it can be more work and onerous. And if you push through it for the sake of learning, you're learning fortitude, right? Again, that endurance. It can teach you how to be industrious, being productive with your time, learning, understanding that, again, we have finite time in a day, and we have to divide up our time between the things that we're responsible for in our lives. And, a big part of that is work. And, for Alec, it's work and his family. And so when he has that downtime, he can use that to study. And so he's using his time in an industrious way. He's habituating industriousness. He's learning industriousness. You could say he's also learning prudence, because he's looking at what he has and making a decision and deciding what he can do in pursuit of good things in life. And, Alec, I think one of the things we like to do a lot is we like to point to historic examples, right?
Yeah, definitely. So looking at history, as we talked about many of the other virtues, we can see that, we mentioned specific examples, and by studying history, looking at these characters, looking at these people, we can see examples of virtue. So we did talk about, you can study virtue point blank using, for example, Joseph Pieper's Four Cardinal Virtues. We can also look at media, as we've brought up, such as well, Batman, Lord of the Rings, exactly. And then going to the nonfiction side, we can also look at history as examples of virtue. And again, we brought it up in the past, but it does take the active reading or listening or watching some sort of documentary or film about these people, spending the time to understand them and who they are. So by studying the history, you can also see the practical ways of living the virtue. So we've already mentioned a lot of them with regards to fortitude, some heroes in America that we look at or really praise above others because of their example of fortitude or among other virtues. So I think that's a really important thing to point out is looking at history, which is definitely a huge topic in schools and education, and that we have readily available because of all the books and what our society has done with the written language.
Right. Yeah, so I mean we've kind of talked a little bit about how studying is important for the cultivation of virtue in the abstract. Alec, would you maybe like to talk a little bit about how personally why or how studying has been important in your life, and in particularly how it's helped you maybe some of the virtues you've learned, or you could even say discovered or find great examples of, how has studying been important in your life?
So I will talk about my academic example of study just because, again, we keep on saying it's related to work, but I'll bring it in here. So learning throughout school helped me, or studying, I should say, helped me because I did well academically. I got good grades and whatnot, which helped me kind of realize my capacity for knowledge and learning. Not to say that I'm the smartest one out there, but maybe I'll just stop there. So it did help me academically. I'd also like to say that outside of school, I did a lot of reading throughout my whole school age life and even up till now. And we are actually going to be talking about reading later on because I think it's such an important topic. But reading really helped me in my imagination, in my ability to wonder in the world. I love fiction. Fiction is probably my favorite genre of, well, nonfiction and fiction. But, but within that, I love sci-fi. And then for more heady stuff, and then for cheap thrills, I like detective action thrillers. So then, okay, it helped me in realizing some areas of leisure and rest. And then it also helped me with connecting to other people, finding things that I like and enjoy, and being able to share those. And those also tended to be some of the nonfiction sides of things that I read, such as history books, politics, stuff like that. So in summation, it helped me academically, helped me in my leisure activities, and helped me to connect to other people. So studying has definitely been a big aspect. And I'll just go ahead and say it. I played music too, which is a form of study. Maybe it's not the same thing you might think when you think of studying, but I did private lessons on the trombone for 8 years of my life, and I went to numerous state competitions in high school and junior high and whatnot. So it also helped me in another aspect of my hobbies or personal life. And we'll get more into our leisure activities when we talk about leisure. But yeah, I just want to say that.
Yeah, no, it sounds like studying made you more well-rounded, right? Like it helped you develop other skills. It helped you focus, and habituate virtues in certain areas, which you can then bring into other areas of your life. So, I mean, that's similar to me in a way. I think studying broadly has helped me become a better, for lack of a better term, how about we say a person who is more willing to recognize that pursuing the good life is a good thing, and there are certain ways to go about doing that. For me, I think studying has been, I've been in school now since, I was 6 years old, and I'm 24 now. I've been in school for a long time. And, so studying has always been, at the forefront. But I will say, if my 4 years in college, I think studying, even though it was work, I had to get good grades, I had to graduate, it was almost more in its own category. And we can talk about this at another time, but I went to a Catholic university that prides itself on still having a good liberal arts department and being able to provide a good liberal arts education. And guess what? The liberal arts are all about knowledge for its own sake and learning for its own sake. And I took that sort of seriously. I was a political science major, which for those of you who are unfamiliar with political science, you really like with a BA or a BS in political science, you really can't go do a whole lot. Like you can, it's very niche. Like you can go work in politics, but you can't. It's hard to climb up the ranks. Like you need to go get a master's, or you need to go pursue a PhD, or you do what I did and go to law school. Because knowing that and knowing that I wanted to go into law school following graduation, regardless, I decided that, oh well, you know what, I'm going to take the opportunity to study stuff that I want to study because I think will make me a better person. And so I studied political science, and I didn't even focus on the research or like the mathematical data analysis type stuff. I studied political theory because I wish we had a political philosophy major, because I think like I've said in my introduction, in our introductory episode, why I've been thinking about these questions that we talk about on the show for a long time. And that's, I guess you could say that's why one of the reasons I did is because I had that opportunity for 4 years to take classes with some of the best political theorists in the country. And I mean, this is literally what they do for a living, is they sit down and think about these things. And obviously they have, they talk about government and more practical implications. But so in that regard, studying has been a driving force for me to think about these questions, the importance of the good life. So I think, that's a huge importance. I mean, this is why we're here now, right? We've talked about that. And I think that's kind of cool. So it shows you what a driving force study can be in your personal development and your thoughts.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I wanted to say. Studying helped bring us to this point where we are right now with the podcast with Smith and Scholar, because we were reading a lot, we were looking into different areas and subjects, and we said something along the lines of, look, we're doing all this, we want to share this, we want to disseminate it. So it did start with us just studying and saying, this is really cool, let's talk about it, let's make videos or something, and here we are with the podcast.
Which is just really neat, right?
Yeah. So it doesn't stop. Again, it shouldn't stop when you finish college or high school or whenever you finish your formal education. The point we're trying to make is it should continue through on, and we'll get into more specific examples, what that looks like for us in a little bit. But part of the great thing about studying and about learning is you can really learn everything. There's, as I mentioned, the ubiquity of the internet and the proliferation of Wikipedia and all those subjects. Again, not the best source, but still, it has everything.
It
basically
has footnotes. You go read the footnotes, man. You're on top of things.
Yeah, exactly. So you can learn anything. You can learn history, music. And music, you can watch YouTube videos to learn how to play the trumpet, or even apprenticeship in the form of private lessons or something like that. Even craftsmanship. I have now like 3 or 4 friends who are trying to start woodworking, and they started it during quarantine time because they started watching videos on YouTube about woodworking, and now they're into it and doing projects on their own.
No, that was the first thing I was thinking about when we were talking about craftsmanship. It's like, there's so many resources out there. I mean, Reddit, holy cow, like you can like get instructions on how to build like all sorts of stuff, and you have to have the tools, and like you have to devote the time and the practice to learning, right?
And the prudence to navigate, and the temperance to navigate Reddit.
Yeah. And then the prudence and the temperance to navigate the task itself, right?
Yeah.
And but that's super cool. And then like, if you're into like science stuff or math and mathematics, I remember in college I took 3 semesters of Arabic, and there was a kid who came in. I think he was in 2 semesters with me, or maybe he was in all 3. I can't remember. But he was a math major as well, and so his hobby was the Arabic language is very mathematical. It's very it's how math and music are very related. Well, it's the same thing with the Arabic language. The Arabic language and math are very related, and he loved to study like the mathematical sequences in verses of the Quran, and how it's poetry and metrical and all that. And that was something he liked to study. And it was because he was a math guy who also liked Arabic. And it's like, okay, he had this niche area, and he wasn't even doing it to like write a paper or anything. It was just, oh, this is interesting, and I want to learn about it. Right. So that's really cool. And then like, I mean, science is so neat. I get like, you get targeted Facebook ads, right? And so there's like this guy who does like science videos, and I watched one, and now they pop up in my feed all the time, but they're really cool because you like learn all sorts of neat things about, magnets and, osmosis and stuff like that. Things you like learned in biology and like middle school and high school science and forgot about. And it's like, oh, that's cool. And like, if you want to, you can go look up more and read more and, become a mini expert on those things. It's kind of fun, right? And it makes you a more well-rounded person. Like just having this knowledge, like it's good for its own sake. It's something we've been saying. Like, it might not be. Sometimes it might be practical, sometimes it's not, but that doesn't mean it's not good.
Yeah, definitely. So there are tons of different platforms to learn these things, and so getting to this concept of lifelong learning, which we talked about a little bit earlier, I think it's pretty promoted nowadays with all the platforms that are out there. There's all these education sites where people put up classes either for free or you have to pay for them.
Mm-hmm.
Even YouTube has a bunch of tutorials and whatnot where you can, again, watch things for free. So it's really easy to be a lifelong learner. And again, a lot of people use it in the sense that it's for professional development, but you can also, again, do lifelong learning for just personal growth, as we keep on mentioning. So another thing to take into account is that the world is rapidly changing. Technology, innovation, science, our understanding of the world around us, and then also different issues politically, socially. So we should try and stay up to date with everything that's going on. And again, in the appropriate manner, not going so overboard maybe into one topic or the other, unless that's something that you're really interested in. But again, with temperance and how you approach everything. So with that, I think it'd be cool to talk a little bit about our approach to lifelong learning, especially, I mean, we're still very young, I would say.
But we have to look forward. We have a life of learning to look forward to.
Exactly. So I just wanted us to share a little bit about what we're doing right now, and what we kind of hope to do in the future as we grow and as we continue our learning path. So Jack, you want to start off?
Yeah. So, I mean, like we've been talking about, like technology is a huge thing these days, right? And I love politics and law and their intersection, that all sort of thing. And there are a ton of groups and resources out there that do free webinars on all sorts of things. So like, there's an organization out there that I'm a member of that, every time a major Supreme Court case comes out, they do a webinar with, they might even have the people who made the arguments at the Supreme Court come on and, talk about the case and how they thought oral arguments went. Or when a case is handed down, they do a breakdown of the opinions and what this means for the law going forward. And, that's, for me, like in some way, it's practical because I'm a lawyer. I need to know the law. But let's be honest, like, there are, obscure areas of the law that get before the Supreme Court that aren't never going to have any relevance to my area of practice probably. But it's just good to know these things. It's fun to know these things. It's fun to know the areas of the law and how they're developing. So like, I mean, I'm sure there are all sorts of groups that do webinars like these, and I think that's a really cool way to, one, learn from the people who are actually doing it, because it's usually people who are experts, so it's kind of like being in the classroom, right? But a little more it's obviously more low stakes, and you can go at your own pace and that sort of thing. And then I also love documentaries. I think Netflix has all the Ken Burns documentaries, which are, if you've never seen any of the Ken Burns documentaries, they're phenomenal. I think he does, for the most part, a pretty good and fair and balanced view of portraying the history, taking primary sources and, and telling a story that is fair to the narratives that were involved, and giving you a holistic picture of what happened. I mean, he deals primarily in American history, so I think his big one is the Civil War. I think that's the one everyone always talks about. That one's a really good one. He has one on World War II. I think he has one on Vietnam. So a lot of the wars, but that's because those are great stories, right? You get a lot of characters and heroes and figures and villains, and so those are really good places to gain information. Yeah, I mean, those are some of the like specific areas where I really like to go, like where I go to in order to learn something new or something that I'm interested in. My dad is a huge World War II buff because my grandfather was a bombardier in World War II. And so my dad has always had, a vast interest in World War II. He shared that with me. And so I love getting my hands on anything that has to do with World War II. So documentaries, books, all sorts of things. And then one other place I think I'll add that is dying, but I think people should really consider as a place to get information is newspapers. I think obviously we have like an issue nowadays with biased news sources, and newspapers are at the forefront of that argument. But there are still some really good newspapers out there. I think the Wall Street Journal is phenomenal, particularly if you're interested in business or politics and that sort of thing. I think they do a pretty good job of, as far as, people complain about their personal journalists who do their stories being, leaning one particular way and their ed board leaning one other way. But I think as for a paper of record, it's a really good paper to read, and you can learn a lot. It helps you stay on top of, like you were saying, a lot of developments that are going on in the world. And so if you're looking to be someone who is just knowledgeable of things and can use that knowledge to apply it to all areas of your life, and just studying, like the fact of sitting down and reading a physical newspaper, that takes time and effort, and it's something that you have to want to do. And so when you do that, I think that in itself is a good thing, right? And so, not to be a shill for a dying industry, I think people could read more newspapers.
Interesting, because my family canceled our newspaper subscription back when I was in high school because they just got tired of.
The local paper here in Houston, we canceled. We only get the Sunday edition, and it's really for the funny pages, and that's it.
Okay, so yeah, that's we started going to gas stations to pick up the Sunday paper. So, at least we agree on that point. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about, I guess, more the professional lifelong learning things I've done, and then talk a little bit about more of the kind of expanding my horizons. Mm-hmm. So I'm lucky that my institution currently has access to LinkedIn Learning, which has a ton of courses. I believe you have to pay for it otherwise.
Okay.
And basically it offers these kind of paths of specialization that you can watch the courses, take a quiz, and then you get to put it on your LinkedIn page. So I did some courses partially because I wanted to learn about them, then partially for the professional development because they were in my field, but things that I hadn't done personally because I'm very lucky to have lots of different experiences in my research and in the classes that I've taken. But this one area of research, which was UX design, which I've done some aspects of, but not all aspects of the actual prototyping and whatnot. Mm-hmm. I thought it'd be interesting to take the classes. UX, so user experience.
Okay.
Yeah. For all those out there who don't know what that means.
Like me, who has no clue what that means.
Not a problem. So I took some classes. I'm still in the process of taking this kind of core specialization thing. Mm-hmm. So it's been really interesting because I'm learning more and I'm growing more in this methodologies and then how to actually enact it once I collect all the data. And then another thing that I've used is Coursera, which I haven't used the paid version. I've just used the free classes to kind of learn a little bit more about a special topic. I did some classes in project management because I was going into a new leadership role, which was completely just project management in my organization. So I thought it'd be nice to have
a little bit of background.
Exactly. So, but Coursera has a ton of other topics, and I've kind of looked at a few. I think I started one with my wife once. It was nutrition, but we didn't follow through on it. So, but there are lots of free topics that you can look at for free. You just have to pay for a certification. But again, I've never done that, so I don't know if it's helpful. Huh. So you can do it for professional, or you can do it for just fun. Just take a class on nutrition or philosophy or something like that. So then getting into the more kind of expanding my horizons, I have already talked about how I like to read. And one thing I used to do at my library, because it's six stories with books on each story, I used to go in the library and just pick a book and read it, even if it was something that I would not normally read. And I'm not saying that I read the entire thing. I would just pick it up and read it because sometimes I was not interested in the diffraction of plasma ray beams through a semi-crystalline metamorphical structure, something like that.
I have no clue what that means either. So.
Yeah, neither do I. So, but I would just pick up textbooks and read them. And then after a while I decided, okay, I should maybe pick up a textbook that I'm actually interested in and read a few chapters. And so now the way I approach textbooks for things that I'm interested in, not necessarily for classes or whatnot, is to pick up a textbook, read a few chapters out of that, and then return it to the library because it's all free and it's real knowledge, and it would cost $200 otherwise to buy it. So the only textbook that I've really gone through basically from front to back is when I was learning Italian on my own, because I speak Spanish to interact with my family, my in-laws. So I do speak Spanish. And we'll get a little more into this idea of heritage and family a little bit later on. But I thought since I can speak Spanish, I should learn some Italian because it's easy. So I actually used a textbook and it was from like the 50s or 60s or something.
Oh, wow.
So it was quite old and didn't have a key online that I could check. But it was really fun to learn on my own and get that experience. And then as a modern version, I did use Duolingo for a little bit, but I can say definitively learning from a textbook is a much better learning experience than something like Duolingo, which again I've used for Italian. But to be able to kind of self-guide yourself is a really cool experience, and seeing how it all works from the learner, from a real learning point of view, as opposed to Duolingo. I don't want to keep knocking it, but it gives you these disconnected modules that don't make much sense for a while. So, and then I'll go ahead and talk about my plans for the future, for my future of lifelong learning. Well, I am currently in academia, and there is a huge barrier. In fact, it's a meme of this article from the journal Nature, which is one of the premier journals in the scientific community. And it says that the title is "The Growing Inaccessibility of Scientific Literature." And then it says purchase options: $81 for this issue, or a subscription fee of $150 a month.
Yeah.
So I'm very fortunate to be in the academic world, being able to read a lot of articles for free because of my institutional access. So if I stay in that field to some extent, then I plan on continuing to read literature in my field so I can grow in that knowledge. As far as if I don't stay in the academic world, I'm not completely sure if I'm going to want to buy access, because it is expensive. It's multiple $100s a year to just on a subscription basis.
Right.
And that's pretty hefty. So aside from that, using library resources, checking out books still, what I use and what I plan on using is Hoopla and Overdrive, which are digital libraries.
Okay.
So a lot of them, again, are more for kind of fiction. They do have some textbook resources, but I guess for the more in-depth, you'll probably have to get a physical copy or request it. So I learned about requesting at my university. So you can request any book and they'll get it to you somehow, either from another library or purchase it. And that's helped me immensely, because if I'm interested in a topic, well, I'm already paying tuition.
Yeah,
so
you might as well make it worth for you. Make it's worth for you, right?
Yeah, so basically I plan on continuing to read books, especially textbooks, even if it's just a few chapters. And that's how I prefer to read nonfiction books nowadays. So anyways, there's that. And then listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks, different resources that I can find. A plug for, I think it's called LibriVox. They have free audiobooks for Creative Commons books.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of nonfiction and old fiction. So again, it's authors who have died in 200 years or 100 years.
Their stuff is in the public domain, so
exactly,
it's all free.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those are what I plan on doing for my lifelong learning.
Very cool.
Yeah. Do you have future plans? Or
I like you, I think I've recently discovered in the last year I don't know why I had never done this before, but like getting a library card and then using it to like download the apps that are affiliated with the library so you can check out books online and either read them digitally or listen to them audiobook. Like that makes going to the library that much easier, right? Because maybe it's just this is maybe bad indicator of my wanting to go to the library and check out a book and that sort of thing. But like you have to go check it out and turn it back in, check it in and that sort of thing. Whereas it checks out, you check it out, and then it checks back in automatically for you. There's no late fees. You don't have to worry about that. And they have most of the books that you want to read anyway. Especially like classics. Like every public library on audiobook has like every old great book of the 18th, 19th century that you can think of. I didn't finish it, but I got halfway through King Solomon's Mines, which is a classic, and like a good old adventure book kind of thing. That was fun, fun to listen to at night. If you get one that has like a good audio voice actor, it makes it fun to listen to. And then you're just taking it in, right? And it's a good. At that point, studying is almost becoming leisure, right? And we can leave that for another time. But that's maybe the ideal, right? And now it really is learning for its own sake, which is really great. And so that, and then also like just being part of the legal profession, you have to do these things called CLEs, continuing legal education. But the cool thing is you can basically do CLEs on whatever you want. You don't have to do any. I mean, it's good to do them relevant to your area of law, but like if you're trying to complete hours, you can do CLEs for all sorts of things. So if there's different areas that I'm interested in that aren't relevant to my practice, but I'm interested in, I can still go and do those. And for the most part, work or whoever will pay for them, and it's a good way to get your credit so you can stay licensed and also learn stuff.
Great. So I think we talked a lot more about reading than we had initially thought, but I think it's fine because, again, reading is one essential part of learning, of studying, especially going back before 1930s, I guess, before the advent of the cinema. So reading has been around for 2,000 plus years at this point. So it's only natural that we, humble beings in the history of humanity, mention reading a lot in this talk on, or this episode on studying and learning. So any final thoughts?
No, I would just encourage everyone to take a real look at if they are studying in their life, if there's areas that they are interested in studying, and going out and figuring out a way to study and make that a part of your routine, and incorporate it into your life. And I think you will be a better person for it, which is, what we're trying to do here.
Definitely. So that wraps it up for studying. We will be talking about leisure next time. So I think there will be a lot of repeated themes when we talk about leisure, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, as repetition is good for learning things. So yeah, I think that's about it.
Sounds good. Can't wait for next week. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Smith and Scholar. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast on all the major platforms, including YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. Also, follow us on Twitter to stay up to date with everything we are doing and thinking.
Finally, feel free to give us feedback and ask questions across the different platforms. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, this is Smith and Scholar.